Well, that sure was dominance by the Toyotas in the desert. Hey there, race fans. It's Race Day Top 5 with me, Frank 5. Phoenix Raceway, home of the championship race. Well, not right now. We're ways from that. But a track where a lot of drivers come to get aggressive on those restarts in the dog leg, aggressive on pit road, and this weekend we debuted a brand new short track package that was dominated mainly by the Toyotas, and one driver gets redemption from last fall. Let's get into all of it. Number 1, Bell takes it in the desert. Christopher Bell gets his first win of the 2024 season, winning yesterday's Shriners Children's 500 at Phoenix Raceway, beating out Chris Buescher, Ty Gibbs, Brad Keselowski, and Ryan Blaney for the victory. What a race for Christopher Bell. Started a little bit in the middle of the pack because they didn't qualify that well, and they kind of hung around the top 15 for the early part of stage number 1. But when we got into a long run, the end of that stage and at the start of stage number 2, that thing was a rocket ship. That thing came flying through the field in the long runs, passing cars whenever he could and whenever he wanted to, because that's how strong his car was on long runs. And he was 10th at one point at the start of the second stage, and he came driving all the way up there and got within the lead in the final 10 laps of that stage, and then took the lead from his Toyota counterparts and went on to win stage number 2. That thing was just hooked up on the long runs like you couldn't believe. Then we get to the start of the final stage, and Bell's team had a little bit of a slow pit stop, which put him in the middle of the pack because of something with the right rear. They weren't able to get adjusted quickly. They had to go back, tighten it up, and they lost positions in the process. But that sure didn't stop them. They twice had to come through the middle of the pack and get all the way back up to the front of the field when their teammate Martin Truex Jr. had to make a pit stop late because he was close on fuel and needed those tires to put on so he could make it all the way to the end and try to pass some people. Once Bell took the lead, he never looked back. He had about, I think the margin of victory was 6.5 seconds over second place, or maybe 5.5 seconds. Regardless, that number 20 car was hooked up on those long runs yesterday and just took it on cruise control when he took the lead all the way to the checkered flag for his first win of the season. And a big win for him for a couple of reasons. Last time we were here in the fall, Christopher Bell was a part of the championship four. He had a chance to win a championship, battling it out with Ryan Blaney, William Byron, and Kyle Larson. Well, in the early part of stage number 2, a right front brake rotor went loose on the 20 car, sending him right into the outside wall. More importantly, it took him out of the championship and left him heartbroken because he felt like if that car had gone on the long runs and found out what it was like when the sun was going down, he could have had a chance to possibly compete for the championship and maybe even win it. But we'll never know after that brake rotor went away and he was left frustrated and was motivated to come back stronger and be better prepared for this upcoming race. So to start out the season so far this year, third place finish of the Daytona 500, nice. But the last 2 races have not gone well for Christopher Bell. Caught up in incidents late in Atlanta, was caught up in an incident, 2 actually to be exact, last weekend at Vegas. He was the first caution of the day when the tire went down, and then the end of stage number 2, he just lost it and went around, fell laps down, and never got back in the battle. Considering how good those Toyotas were, it's a shame because he probably could have contended for a top 5 or even a top 10 in that race. But yesterday he was able to make up for both the fall race last fall and the last 2 weekends where they haven't been that strong. And Christopher Bell is now officially locked into the playoffs. And he said, I hope it's the first of many for this season, which it could be. Christopher Bell has had multiple winning seasons before, and of course, 2022 and 2023. We still want to see a few more wins from this guy and a little more consistency. When consistent, Christopher Bell could be argued as a top 10 driver in NASCAR currently of the Cup drivers. He's got that talent, he's got that poise, he's got that swagger, and he's got the talent and the cars to do it. But when luck is not on his side, they tend to struggle and not have any momentum. If they can have some races where they're running consistently in the top 5 and the top 10 and get some wins along the way, they could be one of the teams to look out for by the time we get to the playoffs and could possibly see him in the championship four. But that all remains to be seen as we go throughout the rest of the season. So nice job by Christopher Bell and that 20 team yesterday. Number 2, strength from the Toyotas. Those Toyotas were hooked up yesterday. From qualifying, Denny Hamlin started on the pole, Ty Gibbs on the outside pole, Eric Jones qualified in the top 5, Tyler Reddick was up there. Those cars were just hooked up yesterday on this track. I mean, the first couple laps, Ty Gibbs was the best car from the Toyota camp. and seemed to have the better car. Then later in the stage, he got caught and passed by Tyler Reddick in the 45 car, who showed his strength, saying, okay, you think you're strong? Watch this. He went out and won stage 1. And then stage 2, the pit stop to start off stage 2, Denny Hamlin beat everybody out because he had the first pit stall. And of course, we know what that pit crew is capable of, especially when you have the first pit stall if you win the pole. Hamlin was on rails. He led the most laps yesterday. It seemed like he was going to win stage 2 until Christopher Bell came up late and took the lead from him. And in the final stage, Tyler Reddick and Denny Hamlin, while battling it out for the lead, looked to be the guys to beat for the rest of the way. That was the case until Denny Hamlin got loose on the inside of turns 1 and 2, battling Tyler Reddick for the lead, spun around and lost all of his track position and never got back in contention for the win. He was able to rally to finish 11th, but you left wondering what could have been if he didn't spin out. Tyler Reddick, in the end of the final stage, seemed to fade as well, but he still came home with a nice 10th place finish to try to make up for some of the points that they haven't been able to accumulate the first 2 races. Last week and this week, they've been able to get some points and get moving up in the standings. Ty Gibbs, again, had a really good car at the first stage and looked like he was going to win it till he got passed by Reddick. And then that pit stop at the start of stage 2, they had a slow pit stop and they fell deep in the pack and they kind of played catch up back up there and got inside the top 5, but they also left wondering. That was an opportunity for this kid to probably get his first career win, and they weren't able to capitalize. Then we have Martin Truex Jr., who stayed within the top 10 a lot of the race yesterday. Probably wasn't as good as Denny Hamlin or Christopher Bell or Ty Gibbs, but still a really good race car. He took a gamble in the beginning of the final stage, staying out on old tires, hoping to make it all the way to the very end. Well, unfortunately, he had to pit under green flag conditions, but because of the tires that he had and because of the speed that he had, he went from a lap down and a rally to finish in the 7th spot at the very end. That's how hooked up those Toyotas were yesterday, particularly all 4 of the Gibbs cars and Tyler Reddick. We didn't see a whole lot of Bubba Wallace, even though he got a top 15. I mentioned Aaron Jones. He qualified well, but then he smacked the wall in 1 and 2 in the final stage and fell out of a chance for a possible top 15. And John Hunter Nemechek just struggled yesterday and was part of an incident that got into the back of Joey Logano and sent him around to the pack and caused a caution. But aside from that, the Toyotas showed their strength yesterday. If this is what's going to be for them the rest of the season, and by the way, this is the first win for Toyota this year in the Cup Series. They have some win in the Xfinity Series with John Hunter Nemechek in Vegas, and this weekend with Chandler Smith. This is the first Cup win with the new Toyota body, and they showed speed already. We're wondering how are these new Toyotas going to fare. So far, they're looking really good. I'd like to see a little bit more down the road from them, but so far, the new body, they're showing the speed, and they've got a win already. Number 3, big day for RFK Racing. Top 5 for Chris Buescher and team owner and teammate Brad Keselowski. To start things off with Chris Buescher, of course, last weekend, if y'all remember, he took a gamble to stay out early in stage 1 on worn tires, and then a tire went down into turns 1 and 2. The wheel came off, actually. It wasn't properly tightened from their first pit stop, and Buescher was knocked out of the race, and his 2 crew members had to serve the suspension. Not yet. They are actually able to be at this weekend's race because RFK was appealing. But now after yesterday's result, they have decided to accept the penalty, and they will now be suspended for Coda and for Bristol and Coda. Regardless of that, Chris Buescher ran very well yesterday at Phoenix Raceway. Ran up in the top 10 a lot of the race, was one of the top 4s aside from Ryan Blaney. He had a really good race car yesterday and found himself moving up further and further as we got through the final stage and found himself in the runner-up spot. If Christopher Bell didn't exist yesterday, then Chris Buescher would have been the victor, and it would have been big for him considering, of course, what happened to him last weekend and how so far this year they've been just kind of they've been all right, but they haven't been great, not like last year's cars. But yesterday was a big step in the right direction for him. Same goes for his teammate, Brad Keselowski. They've had nothing to smile about so far this year. Strong car at the Daytona 500, has a chance to finally get the monkey off his back and win the Great American Race. Gets caught up in the big one late after he gets turned by William Byron, who got bumped from behind by his teammate Alex Bowman. Keselowski won in the pack, did not finish the race. Then we go to Atlanta the following week. I expect him to rebound at a track where he's been very good at, especially now that it's become a super speedway type track. And Keselowski excels at those tracks. He got up within the mix late, but he got a little bit loose out of the marbles through 3 and 4, went around and collected Kyle Larson and a few others and took Keselowski out of a chance for a possible victory or solid result. And last weekend, at the beginning of the Vegas race, they weren't really running that well, to be honest with you. But then as the race progressed, they made the right adjustments and got further and further and turned it into a 13th place finish in the top 15. I'm like, that's a nice result to get them some momentum going forward. Yesterday was aside from a drafting track, their best performance of the season. He ran within the top 10 all day long and got in the top 5 late. That car was pretty good in the long runs as well. Just wasn't enough to contend with the Toyotas. But regardless, a big day for both RFK cars yesterday, getting top 5 results. So good on Buescher and Keselowski. Number 4, weekend to forget for Kyle Busch. Holy moly. The only time we ever talked about Kyle Busch yesterday, folks, was how bad he was running. They didn't practice well. They didn't qualify well. They were like deep in the pack all day long and just couldn't get the handle right in their race car. They tried everything they could, but it wasn't enough for him. He was one of our first cautions in the final stage where he went around and the reason why, because he was trying to battle for the free pass spot because he was a lap down at the time. He went around and therefore didn't get his lap back. Then he got it back a few laps later, but they still did not perform this weekend. And so far, we know how talented Kyle Busch is. We never disputed that. And ever since he came to RCR last year, he's made them better as a race team. And I said at the beginning of the season, he's going to be one of the guys you're going to have to contend for race wins and a possible championship run this year. Well, so far this year, pit stops have been their Achilles heel, especially with the Daytona 500. He went to the back 3 times, still found his way to get back up there and contend, but settled for a top 15. And then we go to Atlanta, where they had a speeding penalty, but he was able to recover to be part of the closest finish in NASCAR history with a top 5. But then we go to Vegas last week. They had another penalty. They fell deep in the pack, got their lap back, but could only muster a 26th place result. And that's not good, especially at your home track. And this weekend, I don't know what was missing with that 8 car. Not just that, but his teammate, Austin Dillon, he's not had a good start this year. He got involved in a wreck for the 3rd time this season yesterday. I mean, what do they got to do to try to get some luck on RCR's side? I mean, they've been changing some of the pit crew members on Kyle Busch, and it still seems like nothing's going right for them. Somehow, some way, they've got to get out of this rut, and they've got to get back to being up at the front and competing for the race wins and getting top 5s and top 10s. The more top 5s and top 10s you get, the more momentum you begin to build. And for a driver like Kyle Busch, who's a 2-time champion, it's kind of weird to see them off to a little bit of a ragged start with the pit crew issues and some of these mistakes on pit road. If they can limit those mistakes, we could see him up front contending for race wins and top 5s and top 10s. But at the moment, Kyle Busch and the 8 team off to a rut, and they did not have a great weekend in Phoenix. And number 5, debut of the new short track package. This weekend, we introduced a brand new aero package where we lowered the diffuser by 30% in the back end of the race car. Like the 5 flaps on the inside of that diffuser, we took 3 of them away and had 2 in there. And we reduced a little bit the front splitter as well to try to, lessen the downforce and try to put the handling back in control of these drivers, because the short track package over the last couple years with this next gen car has been kind of met with mixed results. And this weekend, it seemed like with the new changes, it was met with mixed results. Some of the drivers were not happy in practice or qualifying, except for drivers like Danny Hamlin and Daniel Suarez. Well, when we dropped the green flag yesterday, when we got into some long runs, there was some passing out there, especially when we had the tire fall off with the compound tire that Goodyear brought. But it seemed like, according to some fans on the track and social media, it was still a little tough to pass. Now, granted, Phoenix has always been a tough place to pass, especially with the configuration since we, put down the dog leg in 2011. But again, I do think that this track has potential, to provide some really good racing as long as we're able to let the competitors figure out the short track package and put a little bit of beating and banging. I mean, the restarts were fun. You always enjoy that. The first 5, 6, 7, 8 laps of after a restart, they're so much fun to watch. Then they get spread out and you just wonder who's got better tires to pass people, who's struggling on their tires and begin to fall off. Well, we saw that yesterday, and it seemed like the tire fall off benefited the Joe Gibbs cars versus everybody else in the Toyota camp, to be precise, because they were able to pass guys and they were able to stretch the gap over everybody else. There were only a couple teams that were able to at least run well yesterday with the Toyotas, and like Chase Elliott and William Byron, but then they lost their track position in the middle part of the final stage and they never recovered. They finished outside the top 10 after they should have finished inside it, considering how well they ran yesterday. Aside from the Toyotas, again, not a lot of people could try to make the passive maneuvers that they wanted to yesterday. So it's just one race. I get it. And there's some things to still learn about the short track package, but kind of had a little bit of mixed results from the drivers and the fans yesterday. Hopefully it gets better. I hope it does. Hopefully when we go to Martinsville or Richmond, we'll find out more about this car on the short track. But for the moment, met with a little bit of mixed results for this weekend. So we are now off to some short track racing at Bristol. But this time, we're not going back dirt racing, folks. We're going back to the concrete for the spring race. Back to sheet metal bumper banging the way it ought to be. And I can't wait to see what this race will bring. Now, we're not running the short track package. We're running the intermediate package on your 1.5-mile, 2-mile tracks this upcoming weekend. So we're going to see who's got the best car. Last year, we saw the Joe Gibbs cars run really well. We saw Denny Hamlin win that race and, quote, I beat your favorite driver at the end of that night race. But we've also seen a couple of other teams perform well there. Kyle Larson's been good there. Kyle Busch in his first time with the Chevrolet team ran really well. Chase Elliott's known for running well at Bristol. Byron and Joey Logano also have a pretty good time at Bristol. So who will be the one that will emerge victorious in the Roman Coliseum of racing? We shall see, folks. It should be a very entertaining race next weekend. Hopefully we have some good racing, and hopefully Mother Nature, who has been known to affect our races during the springtime this year, stays away for once and let us race. That's what I hope for. I pray for it, and hopefully we have a good show for the fans next weekend. So I hope you all have a wonderful week, and I hope you enjoyed watching this weekend's race at Phoenix. Subscribe, like, and congrats once again to Christopher Bell and the 20 team on their dominant victory yesterday. Have a great week, everybody. Let's go racing!